Yo, yo, yo. What's going on, people? You know who I am. My name's over there. Pronounce it how you want. This is meant to be going to be a randos conversation with Natty, who I met on BOM. Now, Natty had quite the introduction on the Bridges of Meaning voice chat channel, and I enjoyed it. I don't think most people enjoyed it. I enjoyed the introduction to the channel, and since then, her and I have been speaking, and I think it would be nice to get a story in this little corner. Natty, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm all right. Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting my invitation to share your story and get into some of the things that you like to talk about. But before we do, sort of the ritual around here is that we get a little bit of background about who you are, where you came from, and the starting of questions usually tell us about the home you grew up in.
Okay. So I am. I'm from London, and I was and I was born in South London, and I more or less grew up in I grew up in Southeast London, and I was born to my mum, who was about 20 when she had me, and my dad's six years older. And she is half Jamaican and half Irish. And my dad is English. So, I've kind of, when I was growing up and people wanted to be kind of racist, they would call you quarter caste. I shouldn't laugh. But, I've got Jamaican family. And I don't think a lot of people realize that when they first meet me. So that's probably the first interesting thing I could talk about. I'm an only child. And basically, like, the story of, I think, my parents is that my dad, he was the chairman of a children's rights charity. And my mum became a volunteer with a project to do with children who were in foster care, because both of them were in foster care when they were children.
Okay.
So my dad, by the age of 11, he lost his parents gave away their parental rights to the state indefinitely, like they gave up their parental rights. So by the time he was 11, he was living in a children's home forever until he was 16.
As to why that came to be?
Good question. Okay, so my dad's parents. In fact, this is probably going to be quite interesting for this interview. My granddad, his name was Sidney E. Parker, which is spelled S-I-D. And you can find his work online on Wikipedia because he's a really well-known anarchist.
Oh.
Yeah. So from like the 50s, 60s to the 90s, he created a journal called -1. And he started off as like an anarcho-communist, and then he became a radical individualist. And he was inspired by the work of Max Stirner. I don't know if you've heard of Max Stirner. He wrote a book in the turn of the century, the 20th century, which was kind of like a major troll of all of the thinkers of the time. So I don't know if you know anything about him.
Not familiar. So you're saying on your dad's side, your grandfather, paternal grandfather at least, is Sidney Parker.
Yeah, so if you want to look him up, you can look him up.
I first got involved with secularism in my teens, and I've kept a sort of on-off relationship with him ever since. The Stirnerite viewpoint, as you put it, is basically that he was very critical of the equivalence of the secularists of his day, mainly people like the philosopher Feuerbach, who talked about man with a capital M and so did Bruno Bauer, who was a theologian and became an atheist. But Stirner pointed out, and I agree with him, that what in fact they do is they throw out the Christian God but replace it with another God which they call humanity or man, and they ask us to serve this. Hence his famous remarks, atheists are pious people. And my view, I mean, I've spoken to quite a few humanist groups, as they call them these days, even worse than secularist, but always I put forward the view that to be an atheist, which I am and which Turner was, does not involve you in substituting something else for God. That this idea that you must serve humanity is as bad as the idea that you serve God. God, in Stirner's view and in my view, and service of God and service of humanity are just as much same fixed ideas, as indeed, as he pointed out, service of mammon. That if somebody is obsessed with the idea that they've got to accumulate material goods, they're just as possessed as the people who think they have to serve God or some spiritual essence or other.
Okay, I think we're back.
They're watching TV. So, all good. Okay. Anyway, so where was I?
Okay, so
my grandparents' background is just like pretty standard working class background, and then I don't quite know the exact reason why they both decided they wanted to leave the Midlands and then come to London. I assume from what I know and what I've read that they wanted to be kind of alternative, bohemian, or left wing, or just against the status quo types. She was a poet and he was an anarchist, and then they went and moved to Notting Hill in London in the 1950s. And back then, before it became more multicultural, it was a place where people who were kind of bohemian and alternative radicals lived. Yeah. I don't think they settled there straight away, because I've got, like, my dad wasn't born in that area of London. He was born in South London, but then they moved there and settled there, and that's where they stayed. From what I know about my granddad is that, like, he did not want children, and so the only reason they got married was because she got pregnant, right? She had the baby, but she was already a depressive. She apparently used to be depressed for days on end, and she already struggled with her mental health. And in fact, I've seen her medical records, and she actually has a diagnosis of a personality disorder. So make of that what you will. Like, I think she was already that way inclined. And the story, as far as I know, is that she struggled to look after my dad, and Sydney was just not interested in being a father. And apparently, when my dad was younger, he used to roam about the streets with these other kids that were all the children of radicals, and they had a kind of like unstructured, somewhat neglectful existence. That's what my dad's told me. I don't know too much about that sort of that time period. But at some point he was sent to live in boarding school, and then in foster care, and then and then in children's home, and then by the time he was 11, they just signed away their parental rights, and then he never went back to them ever, because he went like back and forth basically.
You keep going. I can hear you. Keep going.
Oh, now you're getting distracted. Sorry. What's that?
Just letting the cat out.
Oh, right. Yes. So, what else can I say about it? By the time my dad was an adult, he had decided that he didn't want to have anything to do with his parents anymore. especially his dad. And so as a result, by the time I was born, I never met them. I never met my grandparents when I was a child. I've never met my grandfather, Sidney. He died in 2012. And my grandmother is still alive. And I've been going to see her since about 2000 and something, I can't remember. But I didn't go and see her straight away. I was quite reluctant to go and see her when I found out.
2000 and something. That's 2001, 2022. How recent, I guess, is the question. How recent did you reconcile, have a sort of relationship with her? Not exactly. Last 5 years.
In the last 5 years. So if my granddad died in 2012, and then for the first few years I was just completely reluctant, and then I can't remember exactly the year, but let's just say the last 5 years, I decided to go and see her, and then I sort of just went to see her maybe once a year for a while, and then in the last 3 years I've been going to see her. In fact, last year I went to see her like maybe 5 or 6 times, because she's still in London and I don't live in London now. I live in the Midlands, right? So she is definitely she's on end of life care now. So we don't think she's going to last too long. He was as I said, an anarcho-communist. Then he became a radical individualist, and he curated this journal from the 1950s, 60s to the 90s, and he published like essays and works by all of the libertarian thinkers that you can think of. So there's correspondence with like Rothbard and Jared Taylor. I wouldn't necessarily say he's libertarian, but who else can I think of? If you name a sort of libertarian-ish intellectual, then you're like, oh, I don't know. Then
there'll be many people underneath the comment for this video that will be very. There are quite a few libertarians in the corner, so.
Right, and anarchists, of course. Like not just like I say libertarian. I'm using libertarian as a broad term for the more kind of radical individualist side of things. And I know that a lot of anarchists.
Use StreamYard I'm currently using to record this conversation. I think identified as an anarchist, so Christian anarchist.
A Christian anarchist, yeah, okay, interesting. Okay, so the story is that he when he died, the intellectual property of his original writings. So even though he was kind of like a curator and a writer, and he didn't actually ever publish like long form books. There's quite a few books that he did forwards for, or his work, or some stuff that he wrote has been used, but there's no book that he's written that everyone known about. But what people in those circles know about is that he curated everyone else's work, and he published everyone else's work. Yeah. So that's what he's known for. And so when he died, the intellectual property got passed to my dad. So my grandmother passed it to my dad. And then my dad went to prison. And then I got given the intellectual property.
Okay.
And the story gets even more interesting because what was going on? Hang on. Yeah.
Sure. Hold on. Yeah. Before we get to that part, growing up as a child, you did not have a relationship with your grandparents. You said on either side.
On either side, no. Well, my mum's parents. So my mum's dad, my granddad, my maternal granddad. He the Jamaican one. Yeah. So he came over here in 1960 with his sister, and they were one of 12. There were 2 of 12. There was already a great aunt living here, so they came and stayed with her for a while. He became a bus driver. She became a nurse, and he met my mum's mum, who was an Irish immigrant who came over to be a nurse from Northern Ireland. And when my mother was born, after a year, my grandmother went back to Ireland and left her. So she basically abandoned her with my granddad. So that's the sort of background there. And he died when I was 7, and I have memories of meeting him because I did see him intermittently, but he was an alcoholic, so my mum wasn't very keen on having him around. But I do remember him. And then my grandmother, she's still alive, and she went on to marry again, and she had it's 5 children, with her husband, and we are in touch with 2 of them.
Okay.
2 of them got adopted. One of them just doesn't talk to anyone, and then 2 of them I'm in touch. Well, I know one of them quite well, like my half auntie, and then the other one I don't really know them, but I'm in touch with them. I know, like, I've spoken to them. Anyway, so I didn't meet her until I was a child, until I was about 4, maybe. No, I'm not sure the age, but a toddler, like a young age. And then she disappeared for a while again, and we didn't see, and I didn't meet her again until I was an adult. And now I'm in contact with her, but she lives quite far away. She lives in Torquay. So
Okay.
anyway, so that's my mum's side. My mum was in foster care for a little bit of time when she was younger as well, as a result of the fact that her mother abandoned her. So think about the context, right? You have a Jamaican immigrant having a baby with an Irish immigrant, and they're not married, and they're living in London, and they're not, that situation clearly was not a great situation in the context of the time, right? And so, by the time my mum's 1, she goes back to Ireland, and my mum then went into foster care for a while until my granddad remarried a widow who already had some kids.
Okay, so that's the
Sorry, you're like, how much more complicated?
that's the background for for your parents, not even for you, for your parents.
I know. Sorry. Also, the other thing to tell you, this has just happened recently, though. My mum, think about my mum's left with her dad, okay, and then a year later, my grandmother turned up at his doorstep and left a baby at the doorstep. I know. And this was apparently his baby. And then he didn't know that she was pregnant, apparently. And then the social services took the baby before he got home from work. Like, apparently they phoned him and said, there's a baby outside your door. And then he said, I don't know who this baby belongs to. Why? It's not mine, because he didn't know anything about it. And then they were like, okay, then. And they took the baby and it got adopted. And this woman, who's only like a year and a bit older than my mum, has turned up in our lives because she did a DNA test on Ancestry.com, and she found my mum's half-sister. And then, or was it the brother? I can't remember which one, doesn't matter. And then they've met up and they've been talking for a while. And I haven't met her yet. So that's something that's probably going to happen relatively soon. And she's in London as well. So yeah, sorry.
What did your parents do, and how did they meet?
Yeah, so that's why I started telling you more of the background of my parents because it was relevant to how they met. So my dad was the chairman of a children's rights charity called Natty, and my mum was a volunteer with another project that helped Black kids in care. Yeah, and that's how they met.
Huh? I guess my question was more: how did they make it out of there to the point where they met? Like, what was the? Because it didn't sound like the most nurturing environment for either of them.
No, unfortunately, of course, well, I say of course, unfortunately, both of my parents came out of their childhood with pretty intense issues and trauma. And I would say that that's probably what helped bring them together, because they both came from, an environment where, especially my dad, clearly, because my dad was in children's homes from the age of 11, and my mum had been in foster care when she was very young, and then also when she was a teenager very briefly as well. So she had this understanding of what it was like to be in foster care, because she'd been in there a little bit, and she felt very strongly that there should be more addressed about the ethnic identity and traditions or background of the child being put into foster care, because her experience was that she was mixed race and she just got placed with some white family in the middle of Northampton, and like she thought that at the time there needed to be more thought out as a policy about that sort of thing. So that's why she was interested. She was also interested in becoming a social worker. So that's why. And my dad, he trained to be a chef briefly, but then he also got involved in the children's rights movement at the time. So what happened is in 1980, the Children's Rights Act came. They campaigned and lobbied to help contribute to the Children's Rights Act. Yeah, and so my dad did that, but the way that the funding works out for that is that by the time he was 28, or I think it was 26, but by the time he was 28, the funding ran out for him to be the chairman, because the idea behind NAPIC was that you had to be a young person to work for the charity. So after that, he wasn't the chairman anymore. And unfortunately, I think things went south in his life for various reasons after that.
Did that happen after you came along, or was that before you came along?
My mum's had me when she was 20, and my dad's 6 years older, so he was 20. Well, it was just before her 21st birthday, so let's say he was 27. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so it was probably not long after I was born that this big change happened for him, and unfortunately he got arrested at this time, or no, not at that time. No, he did. I'm trying to remember the timeline now. No, maybe it wasn't for like a year and a half. I was like a baby, a toddler when he got arrested. And that really, really destroyed my parents' relationship. They were not married, and to be honest, both of them have told me that they didn't have a good relationship anyway. They had a pretty unstable relationship, and eventually it turned into domestic violence. And it was a lot of my mum like exploding at him, and then he would respond in rage, and then he would hit her. Although sometimes then she would fight back, or sometimes she would she would do something like throw something at him or whatever. Yeah. So they did not have a good relationship. Just to get to the serious point for a second, and then we can very quickly move on. My dad got arrested for indecent exposure, And it turns out that he has a pathology or a perversion where he indecently exposes himself to young girls who are in early puberty. Sorry, I should have warned you. You may have needed the trigger warning. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's the 33 minutes of the recording. Seems
Yeah.
appropriate that.
Yeah, just keep that in mind.
Okay.
So that's what he got arrested for. And my mother clearly freaked out because she didn't know this about him. And she had to contend with the fact that she had had a baby with a paedophile. Or at least at the time, she wasn't sure if he was a paedophile because that type of behavior, indecent exposure, exhibitionism and stuff, isn't always rooted in you being a paedophile. It can be just a perversion that you do to anyone or women in general, not necessarily to young girls or young boys, right? So she didn't know what his sort of perversion was. And she really struggled with it, clearly. And I don't think that the fact that she was probably quite an unstable person in herself helped. And like our life just became chaos. Also, my granddad died later on at some point, and that really, I don't think, helped things.
And you said you were a toddler at this point.
Huh?
You were a toddler at this point.
Yeah, I was a toddler when that happened.
She was dealing with that and looking after you.
Sorry?
She was dealing with that, looking after you, and so I can imagine it's a crazy time for your mum at that time.
Yeah, and also just try and think about the fact that my mum was in a relationship that wasn't the greatest relationship with him anyway. It was a pretty unstable relationship. There was, I don't know if the domestic violence was in the beginning, but there was domestic violence at some point. So they were not a good fit, okay, and they were not both functional. They were both dysfunctional, right? Okay, and so then on top of that, you find out. Imagine as a mom, you find out you've had a baby with a man that's doing this, and so it caused her to eventually have a mental breakdown, and eventually my behavior started to change at school and stuff, and then social services got called on both of my parents at different points for different reasons. Like my dad apparently had social services called on him for losing his temper on a bus or something like that. My mum had all these different incidents that happened with her. One of them was at the school, which is a whole other story. Just chaos and drama, and yeah. So that's happened, and then eventually social services get involved. My mum's behaviour continues to deteriorate, and then eventually I get taken into foster care. Because if you think about it as well, my mum didn't really have a lot of family around, and the family she did have, she kind of retreated. She internalized. She didn't try and reach out for proper help. I could go into how she reacted, and I used to have problems with how she reacted and stuff. I used to hold some of it against her, but now I kind of have more empathy for what she was dealing with and the type of person that she is. She really struggled to handle the situation, and eventually, I'm in foster care. And
how old?
7. There is more to it though. I bet you wasn't thinking that my background was going to be this complicated.
We're 40 minutes into the conversation and you're 7 years old.
Right, okay. Well, I'll try and speed up, okay?
No. Well, it's your time. I've got as much time as you will.
Yeah, so my mom, remember that she wanted to be social worker, okay? And so she was doing like health and social care training and youth work or something like that, right? Okay. And she was part of a project that was like a committee, that was like a pilot project, a committee that had people from the community like her and directors of social services, and then they would have a caseload together. Yeah. And she spoke out about some incident with a young teenage girl who was being drugged or being given drugs and stuff. And her and another person spoke out against this and said that they didn't agree with it. And then they made some enemies in social services as a result. Yeah. And so my mum basically says that my dad knew a lot of people involved in social services as well, because he was the chairman of a children's rights charity. And then he also knew people through that who were involved in health and social care, social services, you know, that sector. Okay. And they all thought that he was a charismatic, intelligent man who probably should go on to work for another charity, be a bit of a, not an alpha, but you know, an influential person. I know this because I know some people that knew him who they were like trying to build him up for that type of position. Yeah. But so clearly him being arrested for what he was arrested for was a major blow to what was going on. And he did not tell anyone about his arrest. The only person that really knew was my mum. And so my mum then had to handle the fact that she knew and he didn't really tell anyone. And then he was sort of holding it against her, but then she held it against him as well. Yeah. So they had this very toxic dynamic where she would say to him, do this, do that, or I'll tell everyone. And he would also do the same sort of thing to her because she didn't want anyone to know. And I these days I understand it, but back then, years ago, I would have been like, why wouldn't you just told everyone? It's not you that did this crime. You should have been distancing yourself from this man. But anyway, they had this toxic thing going on for a long time. And that's when I went into foster care. But basically, the reason I'm telling you is the story is that he went and made a deal with a few of the social workers. Yeah. And my mum got a phone call from a social worker one day saying, what have you done? You've done something to piss someone off. Because now that you're being investigated for your children's, for neglect of your child, right? They're going to hold this against you because you made an enemy in social services. Yeah. And now your ex is now talking to them. And it all became very like a conspiracy basically. I don't know, like, have you seen a BBC TV show? What was that one that was about the police? So there was a conspiracy going on that I watched when I was pregnant. Do you ever watch TV?
Line of Duty.
Line of Duty, yeah, very Line of Duty. You know, that kind of, imagine the meme of the man with the notice board, you know, seriously, like it was a bit like that. So yeah, it destroyed my mum's life, clearly. And she was sectioned at some point. And I was in foster care for 2.5 years. And then my dad's won full residency custody of me, and my mum's parental rights got taken away from her, which, by the way, is extremely rare. It does not happen very often. Even people who are parents with criminal records or are not deemed necessarily to be good parents, even they don't have their parental rights taken away, but my mum did. Yeah. She did do a few things that would warrant that. She has a few aggressive outbursts of behavior and stuff. But at the same time, yeah, I'm just trying to give you some perspective on how dramatic that is. So basically, by the time I went to live with him, go on.
Before we get there, I was 5-year-old Natty's life living in this.
Just traumatic, really. My memories of when I was living with my mum after my parents had split up was that my mum was just erratic, and she would spend days listening to music, trying to lift her mood up, and then she would have days where she would just be in bed for like 3 days, and then she was always late taking me to school. And then she would cause problems at the school because she would be unhappy with something, and then she was just kind of bipolar like. I'm not saying she has bipolar, but that kind of up and down, erratic type of, she was like that for at that time, I would say. And I do remember having memories of saying, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to be somewhere else, because it was not good. And I had to have you heard of the term parentification? Parentification is where the child starts to comfort and emotionally regulate the parent.
Gotcha.
So I became like that for her. I have vivid memories of doing that at a younger age. So that wasn't good. I do remember, though, that she was very passionate about education, and she got me reading at a young age. She was trying to get me into on the pathway of a good school so I could get a scholarship for a private school. She was very intelligent, and she had, that side of her was good, something that I learned from, and I won't forget, or it still probably affected me in a positive way, right? And then I have memories of my dad's coming over and them still trying to do co-parenting, even though their whole world was, because even though he got arrested and he went to court, he had a suspended sentence. Yeah. Oh, the baby's turned up. Hey, buddy. Yeah, so as I explained, my mum lost her parental rights. My dad gained full residency custody. And to be honest, he should not have been given custody of me. That shouldn't have happened, in my opinion. I used to feel the opposite. I used to think that in the situation, it was the best decision. But now, actually, I've changed my mind in the sense that, I've moved on. I think that he should not have been. He's a registered sex offender. He should not have been given custody of me.
What was your experience like in foster? How many did you spend time with?
There were about 4 children, and it was like a council estate in South London with a mixed race family. The woman was nice enough, but I didn't really feel like loved or like I had a nice warm experience. She was, I don't have anything against her or anything, but like, I think she had a lot of kids there, and I think she ran it in a very legalistic, military-ish way. She wasn't warm, and her daughter, I think, struggled with it. Her son, the brother, definitely struggled with it. He was not. I don't think he enjoyed having foster children because he just refused to talk to any of us. So
did you get a sense that she was doing it for the money, or was there like a moral motivation? That
both. I think she did it because she was adopted.
Okay.
Which is what she told me. But I think maybe she had gone through the motions, got to the point where she was going through the motions, and the money was being motivated.
Yeah. She's probably had enough bad kids with bad experiences that made her more legalistic. And
yeah, maybe. I'm not 100% sure, really. But I did not enjoy my experience, to be honest. It
How did they
wasn't.
come to your experience with your mum?
Well, I suppose it was more stable. It was more stable in the sense that, you know, we went to school on time, and my mum wasn't like, you know, she wasn't up and down like my mom. She was pretty decent in that way. But you know, my mum did have deep care and love for me. Like I've never felt like my mum didn't care, or you know, that she wouldn't do the best, what she thought was best at the time. And I think that my thinking about it now is that if the child can stay in the home, even if the home is pretty dysfunctional, the attachment with the parent is the primary attachment is probably the if you can try and keep that going, that is probably, it's better for them to just stay in a dysfunctional home than it is to yoink them out of it, because they become traumatized in a different way by living with strangers, especially if the stranger isn't overly making up for it, which inevitably they're not going to. So, you know, and also I did experience some behaviors from other children that I would not have experienced with my mum. My mum probably would have been very, what's the word? On watch for things, you know. And I think with this woman, there were the children who were coming into the home. They were clearly from horrible situations that were not like where I at least I was loved, right? I wasn't, even though my mum had problems, she had emotional problems. She did used to lash out at me and stuff with like emotional abuse and stuff in some ways, because I could go into, you know, that, but I can't explain it. The other children that were there, they were clearly like abused and stuff, and their behaviors were just disturbing. So I don't actually think that environment was better for me personally. And I think that
Did you go to the same school, or did you swap?
I had to move schools. I ended up going to like 3 different schools in my childhood because of this. So that wasn't helpful. Yeah, I just think that if they had managed to just keep me at home with her, or basically the other thing that was going on is that they tried to get me to live with my great aunt and my mum's stepsister. And to be fair, my mum did destroy the chances of that happening with both of them. So that is something that drew a rift between me and my mum for a very long time, because I really held deep resentment against her for doing that. She like threatened my aunts and said that I couldn't live with them, even though that probably would have been the best situation. So that was something that she made a huge mistake on, and that she deserved, in a way, I believe, to receive the negative consequences about that, because she shouldn't have done that. Yeah, but what she was in this mindset that she couldn't trust anyone, basically, which was just not the best thing.
Fine.
Yeah.
That was full custody, and you got to live with them.
Mm.
And then you moved school again, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I stayed at that school. Yeah, so my dad told me that they told him if he didn't go for custody, I was going to get adopted. And he said that he didn't want me to be adopted, even though he didn't agree that he was the best option, but he just didn't want me to get adopted. So that's why he went for it. But he went through 6 months of assessment, apparently, with a psychologist, and they deemed him safe to look after me. Their exact words were, there's a risk that he could reoffend to someone else, like another child, but not to his own daughter. As long as he doesn't get too stressed out in his life, then he won't offend. So make of that what you will, because it is.
As long as it doesn't get too stressed out. That's such a disclaimer statement if I ever.
Right. I'm honestly, I'm kind of. If you want to talk to, if you ever decide to do like a deep dive into the social services and these types of situations, you will find that those with criminal backgrounds and those who are kind of like sex offenders, they are still allowed access to their children. Okay, please.
Wasn't a good experience then, I'm guessing.
I have spoken to the social worker who, a social worker who handled my case and as an adult, and she remembered my case, and she did not believe that my dad should have won custody. Yeah, she didn't believe that it was safe. Okay, and there were 3 other social workers on the case, and one of them supported my dad, and one of them was neutral. And then she did not agree with it. And she said that what won his case was the expert testimony by a psychologist, the one that said what I said just now. And yeah, she thought it was an absolute shamble. Like, she didn't, I don't know what the right word is, travesty. She didn't think that should have happened. And she was genuinely very sorry about how that had happened when I spoke to her, and she was very generous with her time to talk to me about it. So, you know, I thank God that she did, because that was very helpful for me.
How long were you there for?
Yeah, sorry?
How long were you there for? How long did you spend with your dad before you?
From the age of 9 until 18, 19. Yeah, and so like he was a he was how can I describe him? He was more stable than my mum, but he was living a life where he was hiding from everybody because nobody knew about this side of him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he used to work in record shops. He used to have a market stall, and then he worked in record shops for other people. And he used to collect records, and he used to sell records. And he was an early eBay user. And I used to go to jumble sales with him all over the country. So that's what he used to do. But he basically lived this life, you know, like a kind of like the record shop guy, but a record shop guy who doesn't want anyone to know too much about him. Yeah.
So it was very closed off.
Yeah. And he would spend a lot of time listening to his music and being disassociated from me. And so I kind of, in the end, by the time I became a teenager, I was sort of left to my own devices, really. And I was quite responsible because I was already gone through everything I'd gone through. So I wasn't a rebel. I was pretty responsible, right? I was that friend in the friend group that was trying to look after everyone. I was that person, you know. And I didn't. He doesn't have any brothers and sisters, and we don't really have any other family. because his mum's sisters had moved to New Zealand. We sort of knew her, but she was in New Zealand. And then the other sister, we used to talk to her, but she lived in Bristol, but she disappeared off the face of the earth at one point, and we don't know what happened to her. And my mum doesn't have, she's got half siblings now, but my point is that there was no family around. So it was just me and my dad, really, and some of his friends maybe that he'd had. And it wasn't a very nice experience in the sense that, like, he was living he was deceiving everybody, because all these people who were around him who did not know that he'd been arrested and had a suspended sentence for that crime. And then by the time I was 11, he reoffended to a girl who I was friends with, who told me. And then I ended up keeping the secret to myself for a very long time, because I didn't know what to do about it, because I didn't want to live with my mum. So, because my mum had gone completely, she was extremely dysfunctional, twisted. As in, like, I would meet up with her and my mum would just spend all this time ranting about things, and her life was just a mess. She was just destroyed. I'm surprised she didn't get a drug addiction or something. She never went that way, but she had that kind of persona, that someone that probably would, I'm surprised she didn't become like an alcoholic or a drug addict. She had that kind of I don't know if you ever known anyone who's an addict, but they have that up and down type of personality. She already had that, but Anyway, you remember she lost her parental rights. I had bumped into her in the street one day because she wasn't allowed to know where I lived because of that. And she, I said to her, I would like to see you. And then she went back to court and got visitation. And I think I was only about, 11. And I said, so I didn't see her for like a year and a bit. Yeah. And then when she got visitation, it was supposed to be via a visitor centre. And then I said to the social worker, I said, I'm not going to a visitor centre. I've been in foster care. I've been to these visitor centre places before. I'm not doing any of that. I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to make the decision. I will phone her when I want to see her. I will get on a bus and I will do it. And you can leave me alone. And that's what I told them at the age of 11. So I just used to phone her, get on the bus, because she didn't live that far away from me at this point. So my dad had moved me to South London. We were always in South London. What I mean is he'd moved to a new place, and it wasn't that far away from my mum. It was only a bus ride away, a 20-minute bus ride away. And by that point, because I used to get the bus on my own to secondary school, I just used to get on the bus, go see her, and stay the night at her house. And my dad had nothing to do with it. He literally never spoke to her. So from that point on, I just took control of the situation on my own, and the relationship with her was just hard because she was just a mess. And it was hard because she basically wanted me to go and live with her, and I always said to her, well, I can't come and live with you if your life is a mess. And then she would say, well, you identify too much with your father and he's the devil. And I would say, well, stop being a mess and then I'll come and live with you. And that was basically what our relationship was for a long time. And you can see you can already pick up a theme here, right? By the time I'm older, my dad had remarried, and how he managed to do that, I don't even know why this woman. Anyway, he remarries, and they eventually have problems. And by that point, I'm 19, and I move out. And at that point,
you moved out because you went off to uni, or you moved out because You went off.
I went off to uni, but I moved out because of her, of the problems with the stepmom. I didn't have any problems with her. She had problems with my dad, and then she took it out on me. Like it was quite predictable that was going to happen, considering what my dad is like, as you've heard already. So, anyway, so I moved out, and I went to. I decided I wanted to be a journalist, and
before you moved out, what was your school like? Secondary school, particularly living with your dad. Did you enjoy school? Was it?
Not really. I went to a state school in, multicultural area, and a lot of dynamics going on with class and race, in the sense that, like, I am white, as in I'm mostly white, but I'm also mixed. So I've got Jamaican family, and throughout that whole time, I've been going to my great aunt's house as my granddad's sister, who I should have gone to live with, but didn't. She was the one who was the most stable parental figure in my life. She's kind of like the one who was kind of like my grandmother throughout that whole time. She's not my grandmother, but and she died 4 years ago, but she was there that whole time. I used to go and stay with her. So I had a lot of exposure to Jamaican culture, Jamaican people, because she was Jamaican, all her friends, and she had this big unit of people around her where she lived. And then I also had my godfather, who's Jamaican, and his whole family, and I was close to them. And then my cousin, my mum's stepsister, her family, she's sort of Guyanese and Jamaican. I had a lot of that side influence on me, because I was also lived in an area of London where there was loads of Jamaicans and Nigerians, when I went to school, there was a lot of this kind of like, you had to be in that group and you have to be in that group going on, cliques forming. Some of it was just natural, but some of it was tribal, and it didn't need to be. Yeah, I really disliked I hated it. I hated all of the like, oh, you have to do that because you're white, and you have to be. It was really annoying. I think a lot of mixed race people struggle with this anyway, right? But you can imagine if you're like used to being around black people and Jamaicans, and then you go to school and all the Jamaicans there and all the Nigerian black girls are just like excluding you because you're not black. That was not nice. And then you have to like feel like you have to defend yourself, and
I can imagine. I'm already getting tired just imagining.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you grew up. Where did you grow up again?
Just outside London.
Yeah. So I can imagine you understand the dynamics of what I'm talking about, right? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
So I'm very familiar with that dynamic.
Yeah. So I did make some good friends, and predictably they were friends who were all kind of outsiders of all of that. So they were like, either mixed race people, or like there was an Australian girl, no one knew what to do with her, so she became my friend. The goths, people who were like goths and metalheads, and even though I didn't like that music particularly, I just liked them. I just became friends with all the kind of like
misfits.
Yeah, a little bit like that. So that was my experience. And I mean, I probably could. My mum wanted me to go to private school, right, for a scholarship or something. I don't know if that would have ever happened. But to be fair to her, I probably would have done all right academically in a higher level school, a better school. Because, I did get my IQ tested when I was a child, and it wasn't a number. It was, it just said I was like 2 years ahead or something, right? What I should be, especially verbally.
I believe that.
Yeah. So, I think that this is quite an interesting thing to reflect on. Another girl that she was from Sierra Leone, and she'd come over as I believe, an asylum seeker, but I'm not sure. She'd come over, and me and her became friends at school, and she was also pretty smart. And she said to me, we had like this meeting years ago where we just reflected on our time at school. And she said to me, when I think about me and you, Natty, I just think about lost potential and lost opportunity. Like we should have just not been there. We should have been at a better school, and we would have done far better. She clearly cares about that stuff. I don't care about that stuff too much, but I thought that was an interesting thing for her to say. And so I guess I think that I probably could have done better with different pet. Like my dad was dyslexic, and he was not going to be pushing me to be trying to go to a top university or whatever. And my mum, so just think in a different environment, I probably would have succeeded academically in a higher level.
So were you looking forward to going off to university then?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I didn't go to a top university. I went to a former polytechnic. But as I said, I probably, if I'd have been in a different environment and studied, when I did A-level, by the time I did A-levels, I didn't do very well in my A-levels. Not because I wasn't capable. I was just.
There's
like,
a lot going.
Huh?
There was a lot going on.
Yeah, I had a job already. I had a job from the age of like 14. I was working in a cafe, and I just had a job, and I just was not able to apply myself in the way that I probably could have. Yeah. And so, I got into like a mediocre level university, and I decided I was going to be a journalist, which made sense. I got like a good level of English literature and language and stuff, but I still didn't do very well in my A-levels in that. I was just like going out with my friends and just not focused on it, not focused, even though I was interested in concepts and ideas. Like if I was in a class where there was some discussion about something or whatever, I would always get involved and I would be interested, but I just wasn't able to apply myself, really. So by the time I went to university, and then I had to move out as well, even though I had planned not to necessarily, but maybe I should have maybe it was good for me in the end.
Did you go? What did you go for? You? Whereabouts?
Sorry, I just need to close my door.
Go for it.
What was your question? Sorry.
Whereabout did you leave London for university, or was it in London? Did you stay in London?
I went to Kingston. So this is what I'm saying. It's not no offense to Kingston, but like it's not. It's okay. I think it's better for some things. It's well known for some things like engineering, maybe, but not. I could have probably, Anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that. I don't care now. But I'm just saying that
it's in London.
It's close to London. It's close to London, Kingston. So I did move out, and then I lived in a house share with other students, and and I had a boyfriend. By the time I was there, I had a boyfriend who stayed in London, and he went to a university in London, and he lived in London. And we'd met at sixth form college, but we stayed together, even though I went to Kingston and he stayed in London. But we weren't that far away from each other. So my life was basically me living there, and then on the weekends I had a job in central London, and then I used to go and meet him and stay at his house every weekend, and that was my life for 4 years. And again, we were both as bad as each other in the sense that the first year we both failed. We hardly turned up to university. We were just not focused on passing, and we both failed our first year. I'm sure you've heard that story loads of times.
Oh yeah. What were you interested? What were you doing? Was it music? What was your?
What was I doing? I was working. I had like I had 2 jobs at one point. I was just working in I worked in retail and I worked in hospitality. And we were partying, basically. That's what we were doing.
Raving or?
I'm trying to remember what my interests were. Sorry, go on.
Was it raving, house parties? What are we talking?
Everything. House parties, yeah. We used to go to nightclubs like every week. We were partying a lot. But I'm gonna say that we were not. He
fell on his head off the sofa.
Oh dear. Okay, buddy. Yeah. We were not. I don't want to give you an image of some kind of drug taking raver. We were more like we were in the R&B club and listening to hip hop and drinking too much raver. Not like going to dance music festivals and off our face and stuff. Although I did do that phase later on a little bit, but not at that point. That's basically what we were doing for the first year. And I think me and him just used to, what do we used to do? We like to go to cultural things. We like to go to art galleries, and we used to do that kind of thing, me and my ex. That's probably what we used to do from what I remember when we were not partying.
And up to this point, how much religious influence, exposure did you have?
So my mum is a believer. Yeah. I went to. Oh, you have to go if you're going to make noise. No, you can't. You have to go if you're going to. Go see me and Mum. Off you go. No, while you sit on my knee, you're not making noise. Yeah. My mum's always believed in God, and she always said she's a Christian. And we probably went to Church of England church a few times a year. She was nominally Christian. And I went to. She had tried to get me to in the first school I went to was Church of England, and so she was, she cared about it on that level. My dad was an atheist who absolutely abhors religion, Christianity, and was very much against anything like that. Then I had a godfather who was Seventh-day Adventist, and they had compromised about me being blessed in his church rather than baptized. Oh. So I was blessed in the Seventh-day Adventist church, and he was in my life for a long time, and he did try and introduce me to the church when I was a teenager, to his church, which is a very black church in that part of London. It's like 90%, 99% black. Come here, you. Come here. Come.
And what was your?
You're interfering with what I'm trying to do here. Sorry, go on.
Interference. What was your attitude towards it? So.
I was never an atheist. I thought the idea of atheism was stupid, and I can't remember why and when I made that decision. I just made that decision at some point. I think by the time I was at university, I was just like, yeah, how could you be an atheist? How could you not believe that God exists? God clearly exists. How could we be an intelligent life form with sentience and consciousness and there not be? I don't know. I never even had that discussion, or I just decided that God exists and that was that, right? But I had not I had not. Thank you, buddy. Thank you. He's trying to feed me a crisp. I had not really read the Bible properly. I mean, I knew the basics that you learn when you were at school, but my dad certainly didn't read it to me, and my mum didn't. She was not. But my godfather was a good influence in the sense that he would talk to me about how he prayed for people, and I used to think, oh, praying for people is a nice thing to do. So I had a favourable opinion of that concept. And then my great aunt, the one who I said was a good influence on me and a maternal figure, she is very Christian. But I would say she was Christian in the right way, in the sense that she never tried to push her beliefs onto me, but she wasn't closed about it either. Yeah. So she used to say, she went to church, and she used to say that, I don't think she went to church every week, but she did go enough. And then by the time before she died, she had a friend who I would say was her boyfriend, but basically a Pentecostal pastor was her boyfriend, who he was separated from his wife, and they had like a little relationship going on. And he used to, when I went round there at her house, he would sometimes he would preach to me and then get his Bible out. That was more recent, but she was an influence at a younger age. I would say that I think she was a good influence of Christian humility, because she understood that her role was to, as a Christian, was to love her neighbor and to care for others. She very much lived that in her life. So that was and I knew that came from her being a Christian more than anything else.
Okay.
So
you had Christian examples.
Yeah, there was a good Christian example. She was, okay, if you're going to be here, you can stay on my knee or you can go.
What I'm going to do is we're going to end this part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Because when you get to meeting your husband, and then we'll have another conversation from you meeting your husband onwards onto the ideas that you're currently sharing. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you for your patience. And I did try and go in a room where I would not be interfered with and interrupted. But to be honest, it probably still would have happened anyway. So apologies.
Yes, there is no apology needed. It's always a delight hearing the voice of children in the background. Thanks everyone for watching. Natty and I will have another conversation where we get more of the up-to-date version of Natty's story. But I'm sure everyone that listened to this will agree that it was worth spending all that time getting the background, because what a background it is. I don't know where this is going to be posted. This could be on the Friday Morning Nameless. This is currently being recorded on Grill Country, and it could be posted on the Randos United channel. So I'll figure that out after the fact. But thanks, Natty, and thanks everyone for watching. Bye.